of Afghanistan war on their hands.
Obama is kind of in a trap. He ran as a peace candidate, but became a war president. You know, he ran as somebody who wanted to withdraw from Iraq, but now he's withdrawn so-called combat troops, leaving over 50,000 American soldiers there, and also with a whole lot of new civilian contractors on the way under the auspices of the State Department. Doesn't seem like much of a withdrawal if you look at it closely, and most of the journalists who have think it's a joke. So, here's an effort to try to suggest, again, we're making great progress when in fact we're not, and he's going to get caught in that lie, so to speak. He's going to get caught in his own deception.
I actually reject the premise of your question that Obama was a peace candidate. Again, that was only the surface narrative. In fact, as a senator, he voted to fund the wars over and over again. He made clear to build in the caveat that he'll get our combat forces out of Iraq and he'll rename the rest whatever he wants. And he promised always to expand the wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the global war on terror in general, which is exactly what he's done.
You've put your finger on the wonderful advantages and the terrible disadvantages of a democracy. It's so much simpler. It's so much simpler in organizations, and I don't necessarily mean the United States, in organizations where there is one chief who can say, do this, stop that, and make it stick. But you can't do that here. Obama, as president, his powers are stated in the Constitution, but they're limited by the powers given to the Congress. They're limited by the powers taken by the parties. They're limited by the powers adopted by the lobbies, and they are multiplied exponentially. They are multiplied by the relative ignorance, and I don't mean stupidity, I mean just lack of information of the American people.
The American people are fed up with war. It's not their highest priority, unfortunately. They seem consumed more by the state of the economy, which of course is because of the war and all the spending and all the inflation in order to pay for the war. But they are against both wars. In fact, they're even against the newly resold to them Afghanistan war by a margin of 6 out of 10 now. And so I think this will probably be good PR for the Democrats in the midterm election. They sure hope so, and that was clearly the reason that they all got on board for pushing this ridiculous narrative that all the combat forces were gone at the same time they're admitting they're leaving 50,000 behind. But the American people usually don't get these details. They get the narrative, the meta-narrative at the top, and it says that the war's over, we won, and Barack Obama lived up to his promise and got us out of there. And so, maybe it'll save the Democrats a few seats. I guess we'll see.
Drawing up the annual defense budget, especially one now totaling $719 billion, is so complex that each exercise actually takes close to 2 years. Some have their eyes on flag-draped coffins, others on an ailing economy that's getting worse by the day as trillions of dollars are siphoned off into Iraq and Afghanistan out of the taxpayers' pockets. Still, there's some who say, well, war is still good for U.S. economy. After all, the U.S. economy is based on this military-industrial complex.
No, sir, absolutely not. It's an old fallacy, an old myth that really comes from World War II, and the idea that the government just needed to spend enough money to kick the economy into gear or something like that. And it's completely false. Of course, anybody can do the arithmetic. You take billions, really trillions of dollars from the American people, you make explosives out of that money, and then you destroy lives and property with those explosives. That is a net loss, period. It's not stimulative at all. The great French economist Frédéric Bastiat debunked this myth. He called it the broken window fallacy more than 100 years ago. And it's unfortunate that people do still believe that. They look at a factory in their community maybe that makes F-22 planes, and they say, well, we need these F-22 planes or else we'll lose these jobs. But it's the difference between the seen and the unseen. And what's happening is it's their wealth is really being destroyed as they make those F-22s. They could be making things that help humanity, actually add to the wealth of humanity. And instead, all of our resources are being diverted into this project of death and destruction. And there's just no secret about it. I think pretty much everyone in the whole world learns before they're 10 years old that all through history, empires fall. And it's not limited constitutional republics that mind their own business. It's empires that destroy themselves, just like the Soviet Union, just like Great Britain, and just like Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, and back to Macedonia and Persia and all the rest. And so what happens is when you overextend and you spend all the wealth that you're creating in your home-based country on subjugating other people in their countries, what happens is you'll have certain people that benefit, this war machine that you're talking about, certain people benefit, the stockholders of the military-industrial complex firms, the professors who get the grant money to develop new technologies at the universities, the congressmen who get their campaign contributions, the banks that service the debt. And so they control the policy, and they benefit off of the hard work and the sweat of the American people in general. And right now we're on the very same course that the Soviet Union was on back in the 1980s, and that is bleeding ourselves to death.
Policy reasons also argue for 2011 departure. Next year, Obama will be confronted with big questions on U.S. involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq. He'll have to decide whether to begin a substantial drawdown of U.S. troops from Afghanistan in mid-year, as he has pledged to do.
Well, 2011 is really the year before the re-election campaign for Barack Obama begins. And, the administration wants to take this issue, the issue of Afghanistan, and certainly the issue of Iraq, and push it into history as opposed to into current reality. They want to end these conflicts. And so the idea here is to try to begin the withdrawal, to use this date as a way to signal to the Afghans that the United States will withdraw.
Some question Bob Gates' announcement in terms of timing when it comes to elections, the midterm elections, him essentially being a Republican, if a technocrat, whatever. But others talk about his two words, that he doesn't want to be there when everything fails.
Gates is important here, for two reasons. One, I think he wants to get out before the whole thing falls apart, really. But also, he's under tremendous pressure, not from Iraq, not from Afghanistan, not from Karzai, not from the Taliban, but from Republicans and Democrats in the United States. He's trying to cut back defense spending. Defense spending creates jobs in various states and congressional districts. So a lot of the people who might favor some sort of pullout in Afghanistan don't want to see the Pentagon pull out of their districts.
But who could take his place? Replacing Gates would be hard for Obama, not merely because the secretary's unique across-the-aisle appeal as a Republican appointee in a Democratic administration. The likely course, or so insiders reckon, is that Obama would choose a veteran Democratic politician who would be relied on to foster good relations with Democrats on the Hill and the party at large.
I don't have in my mind a list of people to replace Mr. Gates, and I'm sure that President Obama, is scrambling wildly with his aides, trying to figure who it would be that he got in there. I think it would be unfortunate to an extreme degree if he were to pick an ex-military officer. They already have such an enormous role throughout the U.S. government, especially in the intelligence business, but also as the ambassador to Afghanistan, as the former military commander there. I myself do not think that that's the smart way to do it, because you may change hats, but you don't change the people. He's going to have a vast number of folks from whom he can choose. And he's going to do it after the election so that choice will not have an impact on the election, which I think why it's going to take place in January and not before. That could be another contentious issue that President Obama would have to deal with regardless of who he chooses.
Well, I think he'll choose somebody horrible, probably a Republican. This is the Bill Clinton model from the 1990s. He brought in William Cohen to be his Secretary of Defense. Because, see, Democrats are spineless cowards, and they have no principles whatsoever. And so when they're attacked from the right, who nowadays their only principle is endless warfare, all they can do is try to act as tough as the Republicans. And rather than actually being tough and standing by any kind of principle and winning an argument with the Republicans and saying, no, your war policy is wrong and we don't want to follow that, instead they just cave in, and they think that that makes them look strong. And so this is always the policy of the Democrats, because they're always attacked from the right for being weak on national security, and so they always pander to the right on national security. That's how we got into this war in Iraq in the first place. The majority of the Democratic Party actually voted against the authorization for war in Iraq in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. But the leadership, including our current Vice President Joe Biden and our current Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they went along with the war party and with the Republicans because they had to look tough. And so, and plus they like killing people too. I don't mean to sell them short. So I would expect that whoever replaces Robert Gates will be someone who, if he's not already a war criminal, is someone who has an itchy trigger finger and can't wait to become a war criminal as soon as he can.
Well, again, a defense secretary has to be a kind of a manager. Kennedy went to Robert McNamara, who had run the Ford Motor Company. He was called a whiz kid. And he whizzed until the war whizzed back at him in Vietnam, and he was, basically pushed out. He was kept on by LBJ, but the whole conflict went down in flames. And, now he's writing, rather he's dead, but he's writing, he had written a number of apologies for the role that he played, mistakes that he made, and the like. So you've had a succession of defense secretaries who, have really not been able to manage, a gigantic bureaucracy that's grown and grown and grown. I mean, just recently, the Washington Post did an analysis of the national intelligence operation. It was like a map of all the thousands of organizations, hundreds of thousands of people, nobody talking to each other, nobody communicating, a total mess. Okay, and he's got to manage something even bigger than that, which is the whole defense establishment. So he has to find somebody who is a manager, first of all, who is politically acceptable to the Republicans as well as the Democrats, hard to do, and somebody that he can live with and work with. And, that's not an easy task, given the fact that he really wants to phase these wars out and seems to be unable to do so because of setbacks that are constant. Senator Kerry just announced that the United States is involved in negotiations with the Taliban. He confirmed it, although he said he couldn't really talk about the details. But, what kind of negotiations will we have? What part of the Taliban are they negotiating with? I think there's a level of desperation here where they keep changing, direction and strategy, every other day. And that suggests that it's a failing policy. And anybody who is in charge of it is unlikely to be able to be successful.
Well, thank you for watching. Always watch out for the fine print. Right here on Press TV with me, Amir Arfa.